Good evening, everyone. My name is Marve Besteman, and I'm going to share with you tonight something that happened to me a few years ago. Next to me is my wife of 52 years, and she has labored diligently in helping me through this process. And she has heard this many, many times. She has it recorded in her memory bank. So if I miss things, she picks it up and reminds me by gently hitting me. So what I would like to do, first of all, is, as I always do to every group that I talk to, is to apologize to you to start with, because I will take out my hanky, I will cry, and that's just the way it is, and I can't help it. I have made some progress because I've gone from 3 hankies when I started to 1. So now I'm taking some small steps forward. So I'll get out my hanky, but what I would like to do at this time is to ask you a question. And first I will make a statement. I'll see you at the gate. And my question to you is, will I see you at the gate? And I'd like to have you think about that as we go through the evening. I will discuss that at the end with you, if you care to. So let me start by saying this all started for Ruth and I in the latter part of March, the first part of April of 2006. But she would find me unconscious in the house. I could be standing up, I could be sitting down, I could be laying down, but I had no idea who I was, where I was, what I was doing. And she diagnosed us that I had to have something in my mouth because of a sugar problem. But what she didn't know was that I had a disease which is very rare. The last time that it happened was on a Sunday evening in April. I think it was the first Sunday in April of 2006. And I went into one of my spells, and she called 911. She was holding me by the belt because I was crawling on the floor trying to get out the door. And she would hold me inside the condo. And she finally got a hold of 911, and they came and picked me up and took me to downtown Spectrum. And when I got there, they did all kinds of tests and started IVs and so forth. And my blood sugar count at that time was 31. Now, do we have any diabetics in the crowd at all? None? That's wonderful. Oh, okay. My disease is the exact opposite of being a diabetic. I have a disease called insulinoma, where the pancreas generates so much insulin that I was eating all the sugar in my body, and I would just pass out. And it's a rare disease. I was advised finally by the time I got to the University of Michigan Medical Center that there's approximately 300 people in the United States that has this problem, and I am one of the fortunate ones that does. I was in the hospital day after day. They would run tests, some unusual tests, and I won't go into the whole medical thing. Ruth can do that when I need to take a break, and you can ask her questions later about that. But when the test after test, day after day after day, and they did diagnose what it was, but they never could figure out what was causing the problem. There had to be something in there, and they at first were going to operate and just go in and explore, and we were not in favor of that, so they didn't do that. So they finally said, well, Marv, you have a choice. You can go to Mayo's or the University of Michigan Medical, and they are the people that you need to go to understand this and to see if they can find out what the problem is. So I chose the U of M. I had been there for a few weeks and months at Michigan Law School. Skated on for the hockey team for a couple of months. And so I root for them, so I decided that Michigan was closer to home. and they already had some of my money. I might just go there and try to use it. So we made the trip. They put me in an ambulance and took me to the U of M Medical Center. There they examined me and tested me again for another 10 days. And at the final meeting, they determined that I had a tumor on my pancreas that was creating all the problems. So they made immediate arrangements for surgery, and the doctors came in and explained everything to me. And so they took me into surgery on the 27th of April, 2006. A long surgery. I don't remember much of it. I don't remember much of the 27th at all. 5 hours, Ruth said it took them to do the job. And finally they closed me up and sent me back to my room. As I said, I didn't know very much that day. Tremendous pain. Then the 28th came. And that was the 28th was on a Saturday. I remember it very distinctly because I felt a little bit better. The pain was a little bit less, and I could understand what they were doing. The family was there, my family. Ruth was there, and she was living in a motel in Ann Arbor at that time. So the 28th passed. I remember a few things about the 28th, not an awful lot. So that evening, the children and the grandchildren went home. They were living in the in the area. Ruth went back to the motel, and I lay in bed, thinking about all the pain that I had, what I wish that it would stop. And at that time, I watched as two angels came into my room. They walked in. They never said a word to me. I never said a word to them. They came over to my bed. They disconnected my IVs and my monitors and my tubes, and they picked me up and they carried me to heaven. Let me assure all of you that it's really a nice, short, smooth trip. They're not on a commercial airline bumping along the sky. It doesn't take very long, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful trip. I've had the opportunity of sharing that with people that were close to death, and that has really helped them, has given them some satisfaction to know that when that time comes, that they will have a short trip and they're going to be with their Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, in heaven. I arrived in heaven. I didn't have on my hospital clothes anymore. I had on sports clothes. And I was put in a line of people waiting to go into heaven. And when I got into that line, I looked around and saw a mammoth door and a gate, the beautiful scenery I'd ever seen in my life, the bluest sky, the greenest grass I was standing on. There were 35 people ahead of me. I counted them. As soon as I got into line, people started lining up behind me, and by the time I reached the door, there was quite a line. I didn't ever count them because I was too anxious to get to the door and knock on the door. And so I stood in the line and I looked and watched at the people. Everybody there was happy. Everybody there was smiling. They did not talk. None of us talked to each other. We just stood there and said how great, thinking to ourselves how grateful we are. We are where we had tried to get for many years. I know I've tried to get there since I was 19 years old. I made that commitment at that age. And at that time I was 71, 72. 2 years of age. And so I had reached my goal. and I was with my Lord and Savior, and I planned on being there forever and ever and ever and ever. I looked at the people, and as I say, it's very difficult for me to explain the beauty of heaven. Unbelievable. The ambiance, the stillness, but the slight wind, the wings of the angels you could feel, crushing your body, flying back and forth, slight breezes. And the most difficult thing for me to explain is how perfect heaven is. We have no idea, I had no idea, living down here on this sinful earth, what a perfect place was. I do now. And I'm going to tell you a number of times this evening, I can't wait to get back. I really can. My family knows that. But it's so wonderful. Anybody that is there, all of our friends, relatives, whether it's children, grown-ups, or who, would never want to come back here to this earth. I did not want to come back, and I'll explain that too for you a little bit later. So I stood in the line and I watched heaven, and the first thing, major thing that I noticed up there was that my body had been completely renewed. I was the same old guy, now I'm 75, with the same old body, with all the hurts and pains. But there, none of that. Felt absolutely wonderful. It was really great and outstanding. And I thought, wow, God tells us He's going to renew our body at that point, and He did. He does. Everybody that's standing in line felt the same way. Everybody in the line, children, middle-aged people, some older people like me, and people of all ages and from all different nationalities, all dressed basically in their native costumes. The people, different continents. I don't care what color, there was all colors there, and the dressings and so forth. I didn't recognize all of them. I had to look. Some of them from Asia and some were from Africa and so forth. I could recognize right away. But the rest of them, I didn't recognize all of their clothing. But the one thing that I did notice that my body again had been renewed. I felt absolutely wonderful, and they all felt the same way. And because you could tell by the smiles on their face and the joy that they had, that they were thinking the same thing that I was thinking. We made it. We finally made it. So I took that time and to recognize that my body had been completely renewed. And the second major thing that astounded me that was the music that I listened to. The best way for me to explain it is simply to say that it was a choir of at least 1,000 voices, full orchestration, maybe with another 1,000 organs playing, with another 1,000 pianos playing, and that's what I stood and listened to. And the music was the most beautiful music I had ever heard in my life. And let me ask you, what kind of music did I listen to? I'll tell you, all praise songs. All of them were praise songs. And I can tell you also that today, every time, every day, once, at least in a 24-hour period, I will hear the music from heaven. It is just wonderful. It can be in the middle of the night and I wake up, it can be in the afternoon, it could be on a golf course, it could be doing dishes, it could be doing anything. And I hear the music from heaven. And when sometimes we sing those songs that I heard in church. Well, what do you think poor Marvin does when he hears that? He gets out his hanky right away. He stands there and mouths the words, and he cries like a baby. And that's okay. I'm getting pretty used to that. And by the time I do that, Ruth has got her hanky out too, and she's crying with me. So the music was wonderful. And as I said, I still hear it every single day. And I hope it never stops. I hope that it never stops. So as I progressed and started to look around even further, I knew the line was getting a little shorter. And the people would go up to the door, they would knock on the door would open. There was an old man there, and he seemed to be welcoming the people. And they would talk and discuss, and I had no idea what they were talking and discussing. And they would walk in, the door would close, and the next person would advance to the door. And then take their turn, and they would knock on the door, and the door would open again. And the same thing would happen time and time again. So as we proceeded, and I watched this happening, and all the time I'm thinking, my body is renewed, I'm where I wanted to be, I'm listening to the beautiful music, how much better can it get? And so I took some time and looked around, and as I say, the ambience and so forth of heaven is just outstanding. There are pictures that I could probably draw for you someday as to the beauty, the lights, the magnitude of the skies and the earth. Let me tell you some of the things that I did not see there, or when I got to the gate. I did not see anybody in wheelchairs, crutches. I didn't see anybody in hospital beds. I didn't see anybody injured. I didn't see anybody missing arms, missing legs, with a damaged body. Everybody was there. Their bodies had been completely renewed, just as mine had. And if you get there, and when you do, people, you're going to smile just like I smile. There's no doubt about it in my mind. And I can't wait to get back and start smiling all over again. So I waited my turn. And finally, my turn came, and I knocked on the door, and the door opened. And this gentleman at the door said, "Hello, Marve. Welcome to heaven. My name is Peter." And I thought, oh my goodness, how much better can it get than this? And Peter and I started small talk, and I finally told him, I said, "Peter, you have always been one of the favorites of mine in the Bible." And he smiled and he said, "Well, why is that?" And I said, "Because you have screwed up about as many times as I have in my lifetime." And he smiled and he shook his head. And if you know Peter, he did screw up a bunch of times. So is this guy. As I tell everybody, I'm the chief of sinners. But I know where I want to go. I know I've been there. And I know that I want to go back. And I know God is going to take me back someday. So Peter is looking at that point into a number of books. What books is he looking into? The book of life. Our names are all written there. Everything we do, say, everything is there from the beginning of time. And he was looking and looking, and he finally said to me, "Marve, I can't find your name in here for today." And I heard what he said. I had no idea what he meant. And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "That means you probably have to go back." And I said, "I don't think so. I think that I want to stay." And I said, "Peter, can you look some more?" He said, "Okay." And he looked again. And he came back the second time and he said, "Marve, I still cannot find your name in here for today." And I said, I'm not going back. And he said, well, you're going to have to go back. And I said, no, I'm not going back. It took me all these years to get here, and I don't want to go back. So I said, well, what can we do? And he said, the only thing I can do is go talk to God. And I said, okay, please go talk to God. Peter left. And when he left the door of heaven open.
Just take a little break. Just take a little break. People have asked me, how did you react when you found him unconscious? I was up north with 2 grandchildren and 2 friends. We were up at a water park at Petoskey. And first time it happened, I got up in the middle of the night and he was just standing over the toilet, just staring into space. And he had no idea who I was. And I thought, well, being a nurse, hypoglycemia, low blood sugar. So I couldn't get him to eat anything. And finally I got a piece of chocolate and I held his mouth shut like a baby. So he finally worked that chocolate around enough and got it down. So I thought, our 9-year-old granddaughter was sleeping in the room with us. I thought, this is gonna scare her so bad if she wakes up and Grandpa doesn't know her. So I opted to stay in Petoskey with these 4 children and a husband that didn't know me. The next day, every time he looked at me, I was feeding him, thinking, well, it's a low blood sugar thing and I'll get him back to Grand Rapids. So when I called 911, she said, well, he's diabetic. I said, no, he's not diabetic. Well, he must be diabetic. So she gave him a ham and cheese sandwich or something, brought him back, but then when they saw his blood sugar, they opted, oh, well, something's really going on here. So I have to give him a break every now and then. So now you've had your break. You got to remember to tell him what your angels look like.
Well, that's one of the questions, and I will mention different questions that are predominant in the question and answer period as we go along. And that's always one of the questions. What do angels look like? Well, I can only tell you about my angels. There were 2 males. They were about 5'8" to 5'10", weighed probably 145 to 155 pounds. They were all white, and one of the questions I always get is, well, did they fly? Did they have wings? Yeah, they flew, but mine didn't have wings. And don't ask me why that is, because I've never been able to figure that out. I have 2 angels. They didn't have wings, yet they lifted me up and they carried me to heaven. Will I have those angels all my life here on earth? I don't know. But I did find out something that I'll share with you, that all angels are males. Ladies, don't ask me why that is, because I don't know. But that's what I have found out. I have 3 spiritual advisors that have helped me through this process since this happened. And I talk to them on a constant basis. And when I come up to questions and so forth that I cannot answer, I have to go back to them. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a preacher or a pastor. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a banker. I'm a bank president that has been retired now for 12 years. So that's what I am. And I'm a full-grown sinner, just like you. That's what my angels are, and that's what they did. And when they come to get me the next time, I hope they're the same too, because I will recognize them. I've been asked to draw drawings of them, along with also drawings of Peter at the gate. That's one of those things that I've yet to do, and when we'll get around to doing that, I don't know. But I can't draw, so I've got to have somebody do that for me. I can tell them what Peter looks like, and that's another whole story. But the angels are wonderful, and they never said one word to me, as I said before. Peter was about 5'8", 5'10", 165 pounds, long, shaggy hair. He had all his hair. He wasn't like me. Looked ragged, and it looked like the clothes he had on was clothes that he had worn for 1,000 years. And maybe he had. I don't know. People even ask the question is, what did he smell like fish? I have no idea. I really don't know. So Peter went to talk to God, and the door is open, and I can look inside of heaven. And the inside of heaven was as magnificent as the outside. Only from the gate, for as far back as my eyes could see, there were people. People upon people upon people upon people. There were youngsters, middle-aged, old people, and there were just people. I have no idea how many people there were. That's where all the saints are gathered. And whether that's 10,000 or 100,000 or 1 million or 2 million, I have no idea, because all I could see was people. One of the things that I noticed right away was a magnificent throne. The throne was about 3/4 of a mile from me. It was brightly lit and magnificent view. It was white. There were images on the throne, and for me, that was God and Christ sitting at his right hand. And I'll never forget that picture, and I'm looking forward to getting back there and taking a closer view. There were people milling all around. The first place that I really looked was directly to my right, and directly to my right was a multitude upon a multitude. I have no idea how many of babies. Babies upon babies upon babies upon babies. And for the first time, I'm jumping my head a little bit, but for all of you that don't know, Ruth and I have 3 children, wonderful children. We had 4 miscarriages, and we had 1 son that was born and lived for 10 hours and died. His name was William John, and I knew at that point that if I could get through the gate and went over there, I could find my son. I really thought that. So I tried. I tried to get through, and I couldn't get through the gate. There was an invisible force there. There's something that held me back, and that happened a number of times. I can't tell you how many babies were there. Babies that were probably aborted, miscarried, died at birth, young babies, 1, 2 months old, all ages. From there, I looked a little further away, and there were all kinds of young children playing. And I could see them running around. I could see them having a good time. I could see them, like to me, they were yelling and smiling, but I could hear nothing. I heard nothing except Peter and my conversation the whole time I was there. So I watched the children and I thought, wow, there are so many of us that have lost children, that have lost dear family members, and they're there. They look wonderful. They're having a great time. I didn't hear them, but I could, to me they were singing, playing different games. Some were sitting on the ground, some were standing up, as were the people. There was just a multitude of people milling around the throne. And you can imagine standing there and viewing that, and not being able to get in. It was tough. It was really tough. The next people that I saw, the first ones were my grandparents. And saw them. They had both died in their early 90s. And I know what their bodies were when they died. I know what they looked like, but they looked wonderful. Their bodies too had been renewed. Everybody's bodies there had been renewed. And they were waving. They saw me, and I saw them, and I tried again to get through the gate, and I couldn't get through. The next person that I found I recognized was my mother. And my mother died at 90 a few years ago. My father just died at 96, just this past winter. And I know where he is now too. I used to tell him that every time I'd see him, actually on a monthly basis, he would ask me, what am I going to see? What's it going to look like? What am I going to do? And all those questions we can answer for you later, if you want to talk about that. So my mother recognized me, and she waved, and I tried to get through the gate again, and I just couldn't get through. The next two people that I recognized were two old friends of mine that we had worked together in different church projects. We'd been gone to the same church. We'd been to sistries together. Two people that had just recently died of cancer. I don't mention names in this process, except for one that I'll get to shortly. But these gentlemen, one had died actually in Spectrum Hospital while I was in there. The other one had died a few months before that of pancreatic cancer. A gentleman that was probably 6'4", 230, he weighed probably 80 pounds when he died. He was cremated. You want to tell me how wonderful he looked? He was 6'4", 220, and looked wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. The next person that I found that I recognized was a really close friend. A really, really, really close friend. That's my son-in-law, Steve. Steve died 2.5 months before this happened to me. Terrible disease. He died at the Cleveland Clinic after 4 operations. He bled to death. I know what he looked like. I know how bad a shape he was. Let me assure you, he looked wonderful. He was jumping up and down. He saw me. He was waving for me. And I tried again to get through the door and through the gate, and I couldn't make it. So at that point, some questions come up, and let me answer a couple of them for you and throw out a couple other questions. I tried to go back after I came back and examine the fact of why I just saw these specific people, just certain ones. I know that there are hundreds of people that I know that are in heaven. I never saw them. I saw these particular people, and and the answer that I get from all my advisors, who I do respect, is this: those people that you saw are someplace along the way were very important and instrumental in your life. And I can understand that. And they all were. So I accept that as the reasoning. Now let me throw some questions out to you at this point, which you get to later. Did I recognize the people? Did they recognize me? Who will we recognize in heaven? How will we know them in heaven? Will we know our babies? Will we know our youngsters? Will we know our grandkids? Will we know our parents and so forth? Think about it. Those are questions that are important for people to understand. So, Ruth made an interesting comment to me. We were in New York driving back, and she says, I got a question for you. This probably was 2 years ago. And she said, what do you think those people that saw you at the gate thought when you didn't come in? I don't know. Interesting question, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know the answer. I've talked to a lot of people about that. And I really don't know the answer. Someday I might know that. But at that point, Peter comes back. And Peter says to me, Marv, I talked to God. And God told me to tell you that you had to go back, that he still had work for you to do on earth. He had things for me to finish. And again, I heard what Peter said. I had no idea what he was talking about. Then the next thing I can remember was the lights coming in the hospital room. 2 nurses come running in, and they're all excited. And I'm laying in bed crying. And I can assure you that I'm crying like a baby. And they examined me from top to bottom. And their first question was, why are you crying? And I said, because I want to go home. And they said, well, they politely informed me that I had just had major surgery, that I was going to be there for quite a while, and before I was going to get to Byron Center, and that I was going to, that was the name of the game. And I thought, how do I tell these nurses that that's not the home that I'm talking about? So I said nothing. I didn't know what to say. I just laid there crying. They examined me, and for the first time in a long time, in a number of days, the first really, as I look back and started to understand everything that happened, my vitals were perfect. They told me that. And I heard what they said, but I didn't, I didn't understand what they were really talking about. So, why don't you say a couple things while I take a drink?
Before after surgery, the night after surgery, or no, I guess it was Saturday night, they have doctors at the U of M. All they do is govern pain. And this doctor stayed with him for like 3 hours, trying to control the pain, trying to get his blood pressure where she wanted it. And he was really shocky, as nurses and doctors talk. His blood pressure would go up, then would go down, then his pulse would go way down, and she worked on him for a long time trying to get that pain medication right. So for him to tell you that his vital signs were all normal, his blood pressure, his pulse, respirations, he was in a lot, all the pain was back. And that was what he told me later. He'll get to this eventually. He didn't tell me about this for months. But later on, he said to me, the minute those nurses came in the room, all my pain was back. And he said the pain was gone when I was in heaven. And so that was a miracle to me when I finally heard this whole story. That, from where he was, that his vitals were all good. You ready?
Yep.
Okay.
So I laid in bed crying, and they left the room. And I made a decision that night, and that decision was this. I would never, ever tell anybody what had happened to me. Never. People will think, Besteman, you're crazy, you have lost your mind, you're hallucinating, you're dreaming. And I thought of a dozen reasons why they would never, ever believe me. And I really, truly felt that way. I really did. So when she came in the next morning, I told her nothing. Nothing. I did a lot of crying that night. I remember falling off to sleep, but it was a short night. But I remembered everything that had happened to me in detail, and a lot more that I'm telling you. But I made that decision. So this was the latter part of April by that time. I was in the hospital for almost 30 days total before I got out. I think I got out about May 5th or 6th or something like that. And they put me in a car and she drove me back to Barn Center and put me on the Davenport, and that's where I stayed. And I was constantly thinking of what Peter told me. You have work to do. God isn't done with you yet. And you know, I'll be very honest with you, I thought I did a fairly good job. I mean, I'd taken my turns as financial treasurer, I'd taken my turn as elders and deacons and so forth. I'd taken my turn as counseling and praying with people. In my position at the bank and so forth, I had always had people in my office that had troubles here, there, and everywhere. And a lot of them want to talk about God and salvation and good works and all that kind of stuff. And so I took the time all the time to do that. So I'm not bragging, because I told you before, this is the Chief Center here. But I thought I did my best. And so I laid on the Davenport in our house, tried to heal. Physically, I was healing a little bit, not near what I should have been, but mentally, I was going backwards. I started to get depressed, and every day that went by, I got more depressed. And like I say, I'll be very honest with you, as I am with everybody. I really, really had a hard time with God. I was really, really mad at him. He brought me back from a perfect place to the sinful earth with all the pain and all the discomforts and everything going on. I love my family, but I didn't want to be there for anything. I prayed 10 times a day at least that I would die. And God didn't hear my prayers. He didn't take me back home. I'm here today. Someday he's going to. I don't know when that will be. But I prayed constantly. And I looked at Ruth. I'm not going to tell her nothing. You know, I'm married to a nurse. She can take care of me. Sure. Well, there was a lot of things going on that she didn't realize. And May went by. I healed a little bit physically. Mentally, I got worse. June came and went by. July came and went by. August came, went by. And I started to get out a little bit. I can remember going golfing with Ruth, and I drove the golf cart. That's about all I could do. Couldn't swing the club or anything like that. But I was making some progress, but it was very slow. But my mental state was not good. Depression had really set in. September came, and I think Ruth never totally talked to me about it, but she was ready to send me back to the hospital. That day never came. September came, and at the end of September of 2006, I couldn't take it anymore. We finished dinner one night, I broke down, and I started crying. And I cried, and I cried. And I started to tell Ruth what had happened to me, where I had been, what I saw, who I talked to, all the friends and relatives that were there, the music I listened to. It probably took me at least 3 hours to tell her. By that time we were both crying. I would cry, and then I would talk for a little while, then I'd cry some more, then I would talk for a little while. So it was a long night, and I finally made it all the way through. And what I've told you, basically, I told her the exact same thing. My story has never changed from day one, except now I try to shorten it up a little bit because people tell me I go too long, but I try my best. So I'm done, and the first words out of Ruth's mouth were, "You have been truly blessed." I heard what she said. I thought I understood what she was saying, but I really didn't understand it completely. Not the way I know it today. The second question, or not the question, the second thing she said was, "Did you ever think about me, the children, or the grandchildren, while you were there?" Profound question. And the answer to that is no. Not one time. Not at all. So that leads me into questions I'll throw out to you. Will people in heaven know what's going on in earth? Will we know our friends and relatives in heaven? Will we recognize them? Will we recognize our wife as our wife, our husband as our husband? What if our children don't make it? Will we know that? All are very interesting questions that you can deal with. And I can give you the answer on as best I can on some of those. But for me, no. To me, once you get to heaven, there are no thoughts about earth. You're not going to sit up there looking down and seeing what's going on with anybody, with your family. You're up there praising your God, your Lord and Savior, and that's your job. Is it going to change later on? Possibly in a new heaven and a new earth, which would be the third heaven. I was in the second heaven. That's where all the saints are waiting right now. But my own feeling is on that is, God's going to designate some jobs for us in that third heaven and earth when He comes back. He'll give us plenty to do, and we can discuss that later too if you'd like. But I'll finish my story. I felt a little better after that happened. So Ruth and I talked about it the next day, and we said, now that this is out, what do we do with it? What happens now? And we made a decision that we would tell our children, that's it. Never talk to anybody else about it, never discuss it with anybody else. We would just tell our kids, drop it, and just let it go. Well, as you can see what's happening here, that didn't happen. And I'll tell you the things that have happened now and the miracles that have happened since that time. I started to heal a little bit better mentally and physically at that point because I had someone to talk to about it now. I had Ruth. And so that was in September. October came, went by. November came, and we were making some plans to go to Arizona for the winter. And we went out with some friends one night. We came back from dinner. I said, you need to look at my stomach. And because I said, it's inflated, it's big. I looked like I was pregnant. I looked like I was going to have a baby. It was out like this. and she examined me and she said, yeah, you got a huge abdominal hernia. I said, well, what do we have to do about that? I said, it doesn't hurt. We're going to wake and we can just deal with that next spring sometime. And as a wise RN always says, I don't think so. So I said, okay. So first thing in the morning, she gets on the phone with a doctor, and a doctor I had not seen probably for 2.5 years at least, and makes an appointment. He gets me in real quick to see him. I go into his office, and I sit down in the waiting room. Then I get into the inner circle, and I sit there and I wait for him to come in. And he comes in, and we, shake hands, and we do our what ifs, and we small talk. And he said, well, what can I do for you? And I said, well, my wife tells me I have an abdominal hernia. And he said, well, get up on the examining table and let's take a look. So I did. I got up there, he examined me. He said, yeah, your wife's right again. You have a huge abdominal hernia. Well, what had happened? Everything they had done at the University of Michigan had come loose. And everything wanted to kind of get out. And so I didn't appreciate that diagnosis at all. And I said, well, what does that mean? I said, it don't hurt. So I said, we're going, in the latter part of December, we're going to Arizona for the rest of the winter. And he said, I don't think you're going to go anyplace soon. And so I said, well, okay. So we made arrangements to get with a surgeon, and I was still sitting on not the operating, but the examining table, and he was in his chair, and he said, Marv, he said, why don't you tell me what happened in April at the U of M? So I proceeded to tell him what had happened, that I had this disease called insulinoma. They had operated, and I told them what they do. They did. They took out part of the pancreas, they took out the tumor, and they took out the spleen, and fortunately, the tumor was not malignant. So that was really one of the highlights of the whole thing. And so he said, okay. I said, then I said to him, you probably have never had a patient like me. He said, no, I've never had a patient with that disease. And then he said, but I know one. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, who was it? I didn't think from confidentiality he would ever tell me. He said, my brother. I said, really, your brother has the same thing? He said, yeah. I said, what did they do? He said, they took him into the hospital, and they cut him open, and they closed him up. He was full of cancer, and he died in 3 months. And by that time, I could see the tears starting to roll down the doctor's face, and as sensitive as I have been since April 28th, big tears start to roll down my face. So now I'm sitting there crying, and he's crying. And what he said, Marv, I talk to him every day. I said, I think that's a good thing to do. I said, I would highly recommend that you continue to talk to your brother each and every day. Then he said, he asked me a question. He said, Marv, are you a Christian? I said, yeah, I am a Christian. I've been a Christian for a long time. And we started to get into a discussion about religion, spirituality, about what life was all about salvation, about good works, about grace, everything we discussed. And at the towards the end, he said, "What do you think about heaven and hell?" And I said, "For hell, I don't know an awful lot about it." I said, "What I read in the scriptures, all the sermons I've heard all of these many years, all the studies I had at Calvin," and I said, and I've ended it by saying, I think that for me, hell is just a complete abstinence from God. And he said, "Okay." He said, I agree with that." He said, "What about heaven?" I had no idea what to say. I was silent. Then I heard a voice. It was God's voice. He said, "Marv, this was one of the reasons I sent you back." I heard what he said, but I didn't understand it. And so I took a deep breath and I proceeded to tell him about what I have told you tonight. And by the time we got done, we of course both were crying. And when I finished up, now this was the first person outside of my wife and my family that I had any conversation with regarding this matter. He stood up, he pointed to himself, and he said, "Marv, I'm one of the reasons God sent you back." And I thought, wow, what's going on here? And he said, "I only wish that you had met my brother." He said, "Maybe you would have seen him in heaven." We continued our conversation. We said our goodbyes. I don't know how long I was in that doctor's office. I really don't, people. Probably not the 15, 20 minutes or a half an hour that you get allotted today. I was probably in there at least an hour, hour and a half, at least. And I can remember walking through the waiting room and having all these eyes stare at me. There's a whole multitude of people saying, "Here goes that idiot that's been with the doctor for, an hour and a half." And boy, was I glad to get out of there. And I made an appointment with a nurse to see him. He said, "Come back and see me after you had surgery." And we set a date for December. I got in the car and I sat there in the car and I started to think about this, and I said, "Okay, God, you hit me over the head one time now, and I'm not sure that I understand everything, and I'm still very doubtful, and I don't know what's going on, so you've got to help me." So I started the car up, I drove home, I sat down at the table with Ruth, and for the next hour I told her everything that happened in the doctor's office, and we both sat there and cried some more. We do a lot of crying in our house, and that's okay. It's really healthy for both of us anyway. So December 1 of 2006, I went back into the hospital. They do the surgery all over again. They said, "Well, you didn't get a 1-year guarantee for the U of M." I said, "No, I didn't, but the next time I'm going to." And so the doctor does the surgery. He said, "Marve, if you think the first one hurt, this one's going to be worse." And I said, "It can't be." And it was. It is. I still have to take a pain pill every now and then. and that's all right, I can live with that. So I had the surgery done the 1st of December of 2006. I was in the hospital another 5-6 days, I think it was. And Ruth takes me home, and this time I'm healing faster physically. I'm not having, most of my depression has left by that time, because now I'm sharing with her, my children, and now the doctor comes into the picture. And so my appointment is in the Thursday before Christmas of 2006. I go into his office and I sit down, same office, same place, and he comes in and we shake hands and give each other a hug, and he says, before I examine you, he says, I got something to tell you. And I said, okay. He said, you know, Marve, I wouldn't use your name, but he said, I had to tell some of my friends what you told me about heaven. And they were just unbelievably happy. Said they too thought that heaven would be a great place to go to. At that point, he examined me and sent me out, said, well, go to Arizona and heal. And come back and I'll give you a call when you get back in town. He did, and we had a wonderful conversation. But then I got down to the car for the second time, and I said, okay, God, you've done this twice to me now, and I'm still very weary, and I don't understand it, but I think I'm beginning to learn. And so I drive home, and we go through the same thing at home again. I sat down with Ruth and tell her everything that has happened, and we cry about it some more. So we go to our daughter's house, and for Christmas. It's the first Christmas without our son-in-law, Steve, and it's tough. And we have joys and we have sorrows. But we made it through the day. For a gift, that Christmas, she gives me a book. Never heard about the author, never read the book. That book's right here. 90 Minutes in Heaven. So I took it home, put it in the car, along with a bunch of other books I wanted to read that winter, and took it to Arizona. And a week after we were settled, I grabbed the book and started to read it. And I read it, and I started to cry. And I cried for 3 hours till I finished the book. I'd read part of it to Ruth. And finally she says, does it sound familiar to you? I said, oh yeah, that's my story. And at that point, when I finished the book, I got on my hands and knees and said, okay, God, now I think I really understand what you want me to do. I think you wanted me to tell a few people about this. And so I remember getting on my knees in that house and say, God, send me where you want me to go, and I'll do it for the rest of my life. And when I'm done and you're finished with me, then take me home. And that's what's been going on in my life ever since that time. That was the final phase of me making a decision that that is what God wanted me to do. After that, I started to share it. I shared with 4 people in Arizona for the whole winter. That was all I could handle. And then coming back from Arizona, we started to share it for a few more people, and then it started to get out. And then I started to get calls. Then the church got involved. And then I started sharing it with people who were in the process of dying. I can't do it that often because it's too emotional for me. That is my story. That's what's happened to me. You know, I do an imperfect talk, but now people, I understand why God sent me back. And it took me a long time. It took me 9 months to figure that out. As I say, sometimes I work slow, but I understand that now, and I thank Him every day. And I said to somebody tonight, I said, you know, I often ask myself, why me? And the answer I always get back is, why not?
I know.
And you know, and I live with that. Why not me? I'll just do the best job I can for as long as He leaves me here, and then I'll let go and be with Him forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. It's a long time, but time is no factor in heaven. You know, 1,000 years is a blink of an eye. And as I said before, I see you at the gate. Thank you.